Okay. Good afternoon and welcome to our Section 223 committee hearing for the proposed Local Law No. 1 procedure for council meetings. On behalf of council, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting. I pay my respects to the elders past and present and the elders from other communities who may be here today. East Gippsland Shire Council will live stream, record and publish this Section 223 hearing via webcasting to enhance its accessibility to the broader East Gippsland community. The recording will also be archived and available for viewing by the public or used for publicity or information purposes. At the appropriate times during the hearing, any submitter that addresses the committee will have their image, comments and submission recorded. Please ensure that mobile phones and other electronic devices are turned off or in silent mode for the duration of the meeting. Committee members are reminded that the purpose of the hearing is for them to hear submissions and seek clarification from officers or submitters when required. Except with the Mayor's approval, no questions should be invited or taken from submitters or members of the public gallery. Issues will not be debated. Apologies, Mr. CEO.
Through you, Madam Mayor, we have apologies from Councillor Rotino and Councillor Jackson-Roberts. Thank you.
Thank you. Declarations of conflicts of interest.
Through you, Madam Mayor, none have been received.
Thank you. I will now ask that Ms Rebecca Aston, Acting General Manager, Business Excellence, give a brief background to the purpose of the hearing.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The proposed Local Law No. 1, the procedures for council meetings, was approved by Council on the 25th of June this year for releasing to the community for comments and public submissions. In accordance with the requirements of the Local Government Act 1989, the proposed Local Law No. 1 documents were made available for review by the public on Council's website and at all service and outreach centres from the 27th of June 2019. The closing date for public submissions was the 25th of July 2019. 7 submissions were received on Local Law No. 1, with one of those 7 being a late submission. 4 of the 7 submitters have indicated they wish to present to the committee at today's 223 hearing. The hearing represents the only opportunity for submitters to address councillors on the issue. They will not be eligible to speak to the item at the council meeting on the 8th of October, at which the final decision will be made. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thanks, Ms Aston. We have had 4 submitters who have advised they wish to address the committee on their submission. So I will ask each submitter in turn to address the committee in respect of their submissions, and in doing so advise that they are asked to keep their presentation to no more than 5 minutes and avoid going over ground that's already been covered. I will now ask Ms Debbie Carruthers to come forward and speak to her submission.
I'll just suggest that Judith Reid be given the first go because she has to go to a medical appointment.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Ms Judith Reid, would you wish to come forward and speak to the committee?
Thank you for that consideration, Mayor. I was quite upset about the last meeting where all this issue became knowledge, and I'm glad that we had the opportunity to speak, especially me. And this is what I'd like to say. I request time of 3 minutes to address Mayor councillors be extended to 5 minutes. As before, I'm very concerned that we weren't pre-advised, as you would have known it would be quite an issue. As an introduction, body and end to a letter is most important. And to shorten a letter, form contents without pre-knowledge is not, in my opinion, open and accountable. That's it.
Are there any questions from the councillors? No?
Very clear.
Thanks, Ms Reid.
Thank you. And my name is Mrs Reid.
Mrs Reid. Ms Debbie Carruthers.
Thank you for the opportunity to provide my feedback.
There are two clauses that I wanted to address and to question. The first one is clause L 1.9, which is definition of acted upon. I strongly believe the proposed definition, which is in 3 parts, is highly flawed for the following reasons. The first part of that definition is, has been formally communicated to a person whose interests are materially affected by it. This definition is highly ambiguous and will be difficult to enforce or determine. How is it possible to know whether a person is materially affected by it? Is the person to be asked? How does one define materially affected? Is this the same as a conflict of interest, which also extends to any family member who might be materially affected? How is the person to know if they are materially affected? What guarantees are there that the person is not materially affected? In addition to these questions, a more fundamental one is, how does a person being materially affected make any difference in determining if a decision of council has been acted upon? The second part of that definition in the new amendment that is proposed is, had the effect of commencing a statutory process. What does effect mean? How is this to be determined? And the third part of that definition, the new part that is proposed, is otherwise practically incapable of being rescinded. What does this mean? This needs to be defined. What are the tests to be applied as to whether practically incapable has been satisfied? So in conclusion, those 3 parts, which are the parts to form this new definition of acted upon, need to be defined. And there are definitions. There are definitions that need to be defined. And therefore they're ambiguous, and it makes them highly unsuitable as definitions. The commonly accepted definition of acted upon, in my view, is action was taken to implement the decision, as simply as that. So my recommendation is that those words be used. The second clause that I would like to comment on is clause L 7.52, request to speak on agenda item. And the proposed clause is, each speaker on an item will be allowed between 3 and 5 minutes at the chair's discretion. Firstly, it would appear that the mayor had no authority to limit speakers to 3 minutes, as has occurred at some council meetings this year. Otherwise, why is it considered necessary to make this amendment now? Secondly, under what circumstances would the chair decide whether 3 or 5 minutes would apply? Indeed, how does the chair make that decision? When a person prepares to speak to an item, do they prepare to speak for 3 or 5 minutes? Will people be told this in advance of the council meeting? To provide 2 alternatives will be difficult to administer and will create great uncertainty for those presenting. And finally, will 3 minutes become the norm for speakers? It is my understanding that in the past, no more than 5 minutes, which is the current clause, was applied flexibly based on the ability of the person to articulate their concerns, with this period being extended if deemed appropriate. Council must remember that hearing from speakers is the opportunity for the community to be heard and to thereby inform council decision making. Reducing the speaking time to 3 minutes reinforces the perception that council makes up its mind behind closed doors, regardless of community feedback. Reducing the time limit to 3 minutes will do nothing to improve council's poor performance on a recent report around community consultation and engagement. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thanks, Mr Crothers. Councillor Peltz.
Yes. Yep. Yep.
The actual wording you said should actually be acted upon. Is that what the wording was?
The commonly, I would believe the commonly accepted definition of acted upon would be action was taken to implement the decision. Whereas at the moment, there are 3 clauses that are being proposed as a definition for acted upon. And my view is that each of those clauses are very ambiguous and that it would be difficult for administering that, that definition if those clauses were followed.
And can I just ask, do you have a legal accreditation?
No, I don't.
Thank you.
But that doesn't mean that as a community member, I'm not in a position to provide
I'm not
feedback.
saying, I just was
And,
curious.
and it's about looking at the pub test about the definitions and whether they're ambiguous and whether they can be administered.
Councillor Reeves.
Sure.
Yes,
Yep.
it's being recorded.
Thanks, Deb. Thanks for that contribution. It's important. Just in the second point, the 3 or 5 minutes to get rid of the ambiguity is what you're really saying, you know, so that whoever's speaking can actually prepare and have a really good pitch up. It's either going to be 3 minutes or 5 minutes, just so you know what it is. That's really what you're saying.
And I'm saying that that needs to be made clear in the circumstances for that ahead of time so
Yep.
that when people are filling in the form, they know how long it's
Yep.
going to be.
Yep.
But there's a further point to that with the 3 minutes, it leaves the impression with the community that the community is being shortened in a period of time to present, and 3 minutes is a very short period of time. So if the
Yep.
council is wanting to fully appreciate the potential inputs that the community can provide to help inform council decision making, that the 5 minutes would be preferable. But I think having both will be lead to administrative difficulties.
Yep. Good. Thank you. That's great.
Thank you.
Thank Councillor Peltz. Sorry, Debbie.
Sorry.
Can I just also have an explanation from you, given the fact that when someone comes and talks at the table to us, they have normally sent the information in a letter format and you're just reiterating what was in the letter format. What weight of bearing do you actually believe is applicable to us having read the information and us having to hear it again from you? Is there a weight of bearing that we're hearing it twice, or do you actually consider we should sit here and listen to you for another 5 minutes and talk about it, given the fact you've already told us?
Well, as was clearly what happened here was that Councillor Reeves had a question to ask of me about that, and I believe that the issues are important enough that it's to ensure that those issues are heard and that there's an opportunity for councillors to ask any questions about those issues. And without having been here today to present that, and I feel very strongly about both of those issues, which is why I'm here, and that I've spent my time to come here to do that, that it's not exactly worded as my submission was worded, but obviously the points are there, but I felt it was important to come and express those here today because I feel very strongly about it.
Any further questions? No. Thanks, Ms Crothers.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Ms Lynette Treasure.
I refer to proposed changes to the local law regarding public speaking times, and I oppose the time reduction most strongly. Currently, the local law allows 5 minutes, with the Chair having discretion to allow extension beyond this, but the proposed change will allow the Chair to reduce speaking time to 3 minutes with a limit of 5 minutes. For important matters, the public needs to bring to the attention of the whole Council a time limit of 3 minutes amounts, I believe, to a parody of engagement. As a condition of becoming a councillor, all must swear to abide by the Local Government Act, which sets out Part 4, Role of a Council, 65E, facilitate effective communication between the council and the community, and set out in the Councillor Code of Conduct as a requirement to office, inclusion. We will be accessible and active in engaging with our community. We will invite, listen to and seek to understand the views of others. Central to the role of councillor is to be the representative of the people, not an autocrat, a dictator or a rubber stamp of bureaucracy. Communication is a two-way process, vital to democracy. And although in Australia we take it as a given, democracy is seriously eroding. I remember a time in local government when the monthly full-day council meetings were open to the public, all day, with the newspaper reporter always in attendance. Councillors were comfortable relating discussion of the day, and opinions of individual councillors were reported to the press. People knew what was going on. Then came amalgamation, sold to the public as a more efficient and therefore less costly operation. But as its scope expanded and the bureaucracy grew and grew, councillors became more and more dependent on their so-called experts. Now people question why we have councillors at all. They meet regularly with staff in closed meetings where the real decision-making occurs. Staff open and respond to mail on their behalf. Their speeches for functions are written by the propaganda department, and public comments from councillors other than the Mayor are seldom in the press. There is a sense that the public be excluded from early consideration of projects, so by the time they are to be finalised, it is too late for modification. We saw this with the budget. Public input is an interference and therefore a threat. And so the statutory process for required hearings is simply something to be endured, not seriously considered, and made as brief, formal and as unwelcoming as possible. This is a sad reflection on council's culture of exclusion of its people. Compared to other councils across the state, we are performing badly. Although in one of the lowest socio-economic areas, our rates are set to the max and our councillors cost us amongst the highest. We were shown to be the most secretive in the state, and now the latest surveys reveal our very low customer service and public engagement record. Clearly, we are not getting good representation for money, and that is why people now question, why have councillors at all? I was at that meeting last year when a huge crowd attended, concerned about a toxic mine in our clean, green environment. They had spent hours preparing submissions and travelling long distances, but arbitrarily their time was cut from 5 to 3 minutes, although the issue has serious implications for East Gippsland's future. Clearly, people's concerns were irrelevant, and while councillors spent hours on social activities, they would not listen for 5 minutes to the most serious issues of their people. I would like to know which councillors supported the proposed time reduction in the local law and whether they intend standing for the next election. Council rating continues to fall. You can rev up the propaganda machine as much as you like, but the people are increasingly cynical. And the latest blow to democracy, human respect and genuine interaction is the council's new telescreen over there, which ticks away the seconds of the time a person may speak. Bought at ratepayers' expense, it epitomises a new level of arrogant control and dehumanisation. I don't know whether you're old enough to remember, but in the 1960s when television was new, Doctor Who came out, and I remember the robot Daleks who threatened us to obey. Exterminate, exterminate. And now we have our own machine. 180 seconds to speak and then you must desist. 10 seconds left.
Thank you,
8,
Ms
9,
Treasure.
5, 2, desist from speaking or we'll cut off your microphone. Desist from speaking or...
Thank you, Ms Treasure. I'll ask you to finish, please.
Desist.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was beautiful.
Are there any questions, councillors? No. Mr Eagleson.
Thank you. And the plan here it's to amend the local law meeting procedures. Well, that's fine. Most of the amendments I have no problem with. However, the proposal to give the Chair the right to restrict speaking times to 3 minutes, I feel, is totally unacceptable. And I say this in the context that councillors must be aware that councillors are performing rather poorly. And to back that up, I'll have a local government community satisfaction survey coordinated by DWELP in the East Gippsland Shire, and when you go through it, there's some very damning things about the this particular Shire. Performance. Performance is rated significantly lower than similar councils. 2, customer contact. Performance is rated significantly lower than statewide and large rural group areas average. 3, areas for improvement, consultation and engagement in community decisions. Now, this is very relevant to what we're talking about today. And we move on to the state-sponsored Know Your Council site. If we look at transparency, here we have 19.46% of council decisions made in closed meetings. Similar councils, 8.66. Community satisfaction and community consultation and engagement, lower than similar councils. But all is not lost. Cost for councillors, we score very highly there. East Gippsland Shire Council, $52,986.14 per councillor. Similar councils, $42,861. That means that ratepayers of East Gippsland Shire are paying over $10,000 more per councillor than similar councils. Now, with that context in mind, if we move to page 1 of the local law that we're now dealing with, you'll find that it says promote and encourage community participation by providing mechanisms for the council to ascertain the community's views and expectations. Now, there are more than 30 proposed changes to this local law in here, which, if allowed 5 minutes, it gives a person like myself 10 seconds per amendment. Now, if in the wisdom of the Chair we'll cut to 3 minutes, it would give us 6 seconds per amendment. Now, that's hardly providing mechanisms for the council to ascertain the community's views and expectations. I believe that no mayor, either past, present or future, has the wisdom to decide in advance what knowledge a person is going to bring forward before they have had time to adequately present their case. So to restrict them to 3 minutes is denying them procedural fairness. If time at council meetings is a problem, I would suggest that rather than cut community presentation time to 3 minutes, councillors' show and tell reports could be presented in a written form, which would save at least 8 hours per year, significantly more than 3 minutes. And with that, that's it.
Thanks, Mr Eagleson. Are there questions from the councillors? No. Thank you. I will now ask Ms Aston the process following the Section 223 committee hearing.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The committee will now formulate recommendations, and these will be incorporated into a report to be submitted to the October meeting of Council, at which Local Law 1 will be considered for adoption with or without amendment. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thanks, Ms Aston. I'd like to thank those who submitted and also those who have attended today and who have presented their submissions, and I now declare the hearing closed. Thank you.